Good morning, afternoon, evening, ladies and gentlemen. How are you this afternoon, evening, or morning, whatever time you're tuning in the program here on allpointstv.com. I'm George Moss, the host of the program, and we come together to you from 2 o'clock to 3 every Monday, and then every second and fourth Mondays we are preceding the program called Satori's Black History Corner that comes on around 3:30 and lasts about 30 minutes. And they are inviting you to participate therein as well. And all the programs here at the studio we want you to pay attention to. And we're working very hard here to bring you something different each week and keep you up to date about what's happening in your world. And hopefully that means you will find yourself excited about participating more fully in what is going on around you and making a difference in the lives of those who you touch, whose lives you touch, and will have a long-range benefit to the nation, humankind, and all of the world. We are going to talk about a couple of topics this afternoon. We're going to talk about one of the programs that came on Fox last week, and I was very much glad, very glad as a matter of fact, that it was re-aired last night, which was the program called The Man Who Killed Osama bin Laden. Beyond that, we're going to talk also about what is happening in Ferguson and some of the things I just wrote about on Facebook, where I was trying to put into context a statement that was made to Abraham Lincoln, who then gave it out to the rest of the nation when he said, "You can fool some of the people all the time, you can fool all the people some of the time, but you can't fool all the people all of the time." And I think that would be fitting to apply that to what is happening in Ferguson right now as they're getting ready to announce the verdict. Some are saying it will be announced sometime this week, and others are saying that it might be postponed until the middle of next week. But I think that the announcement is pretty clear based on what we are being told, that is being leaked out of the grand jury. And it seems to me that what they're doing in Ferguson is preparing the public for an announcement of what the evidence has led the grand jury to conclude. And I don't think that conclusion is going to be one that fulfills the prophets out there in the street who are all knowing without having looked at the evidence. And CNN is not the evidence. What they're reporting on these networks does not constitute the evidence. The evidence is what you actually put before a jury and have them to decide, looking at all the information, calling witnesses before the jurors, and then having some delineation of what the evidence is and what that means and what conclusions are to be drawn from it. I don't think that Don Lemon is interested in doing that on CNN, from what I've been able to deduce from his reporting. In fact, I think Don Lemon and all those others who've been reporting on this story from the left are really media provocateurs. And what they've done, with a lot of help from their friends in the government, in this continuing audacious regime, is help fan the fires. In fact, Don Lemon has not really been so much reporting the news as he's been making the news as it relates to what is happening in Ferguson, Missouri. And that is very clear by the fact that when things were dying down somewhat and the story was no longer the highlights of what was happening around the nation, around this racial animus that they seem to be primarily interested in pushing us up against each other. As soon as it was dying down, what Don Lemon did was go into the city with the camera. Then he's out there acting like he's being unfairly treated by being asked to get back on the sidewalk and stop interfering with the work that was being done by the police that were trying to maintain order. And just what he said in the microphone in the media was an indication of where he's coming from in terms of the provocative things he was doing out there on the street. But things that died down, and then you see him down there with his camera, and of course when you bring the camera and the microphone into a public setting, people want to be on television and have a chance for a starring role all of a sudden, and here they are being asked their views, and then the reignition of it. Even went into the elementary school and was asking the children, these are 8 and 9-year-old children, and asking the children what they thought about what's going on as a way of rekindling the fires and reigniting the interest in this drama, most of which they had in fact caused themselves by the way they reported the story, which was a local story that became nationalized through the media. So we'll talk about that, but I want to start out first of all talking about this program, this 2-hour program that aired on Fox Tuesday and Wednesday and was re-aired last night, which would have been Sunday, where they aired both episodes in the same one after the other, coming on at 9 o'clock and 10 o'clock. And I wanted to talk about it from the standpoint of the person who actually eliminated Osama bin Laden, and that was the Navy SEAL of Team 6, Rob O'Neill. And you had to just be totally impressed with Rob O'Neill as he reported how the Team 6 went about doing its professional business, being called upon and feeling honored to be called upon to carry out this mission. What I was really impressed with was that many of them, and certainly Rob O'Neill reported that he was on a mission he felt honored to be on, but he did not expect, and the Navy SEALs did not expect that this would be anything possibly but a one-way mission. And that was really riveting, that they felt honored to be called upon to be involved in a mission where the likelihood of them returning from what they had been assigned to do, the likelihood, the 90% likelihood was that they would not come back from that mission. They fully went there with the expectation that they might not survive it. And that was incredible. One of the things that showed the courage of this group, the bravery of the people that are fighting for this country, was seen by that when they got, I think it was on the second floor. There were 3 floors in this building where bin Laden was holed up in Pakistan, and they had studied the layout of the facility, knew it from the training they had received, knew exactly where everything was. When they first, the first helicopter that landed inside the compound where bin Laden was staying, the pilot, and they had some of the best pilots on this mission that were available, when they had even planned for what if the helicopter had in fact crashed? What if the landing, something went on with the landing? And when they went into the compound, which is enclosed by a wall, apparently the air circulation was such that the pilot realized that the helicopter was going down, and what he did was to brace the back end of the helicopter on the wall so that the crash would not be so fortuitous that the Navy SEAL members could not get off of the helicopter and began to carry out the mission. So the crash of the helicopter, one of the helicopters that was involved, there were 2 helicopters involved initially, with one that was going to be in the backup to pick them up after the mission had run its course. And they knew then it was time for them to get off the helicopter, and they began to carry out the mission. Very well trained to not be stopped by anything that would have thrown any monkey wrenches into the operation. They were prepared for all possibilities, even the crashing of the aircraft. And the other helicopter that was the one that had Rob O'Neill on it, they're now pursuing the mission. And in that, where they had a very whispered conversation, very brief, you don't actually do a lot of talking on these missions, but Rob O'Neill found that the plane, the helicopter had crashed, one of the helicopters had crashed, and he was thinking it had been shot down. He said, so one of them was taken out of commission. He said, he started offering some solace about the ones who must have gone down with the craft, and the Navy SEAL member that was on that craft said, "Dude, you passed right by the craft. We were the ones on it." And they were on the mission inside the compound, and they got to carry this mission out very, very rapidly, because as they're approaching the ones they're confronting on the first floor, then those on the second floor and the third floor can prepare for a defense. And they have to therefore move on this mission. This has to be done at a very rapid pace. I mean, they carried this mission out in about 15 minutes before they actually got to bin Laden. They have been told that when they run into what amounted to bin Laden's son on the second floor, then that would be the last defense between them and the person that they had come to collect. Not to take him anywhere, but to extend the justice that he deserved on the spot for what had happened on 9/11. And so, listen to Rob O'Neill, who was really, I mean, just to listen to this man, you could see the character, the integrity. It just came pouring. It was pouring through every pore of his body almost. The way he sat there. I mean, everything about him was commanding. And he said that when they threw one bomb to open up what looked like a door, it was a false door, and behind it was concrete. And he said that some of them were saying, "Oh man, nothing was behind the door," but he said that what that showed him was that there was somebody important in that compound, and he had come to the right place. Because they have these false doors was indication that they were trying to throw people off as to who was in that compound. And it showed him that there was somebody upstairs who they had come to get. Another part of the story, which I thought was just incredible, and that was a part of the story where when they got up on the second or third floor, I can't remember which one it was, but it was certainly not on the first floor, the entry level. They had already secured that by anyone that fired. These Navy SEAL members don't miss, and so any fire that was even remotely coming their way, or even a threat of it, was eliminated, and they secured each floor before going to the next floor. So they're on the second floor, I think it was this time, and they saw, and two women were behind a curtain, and it wasn't clear whether or not they had put their vests on, the suicide vests. Didn't know if they had them or not, but didn't know if they had put them on or not. And what happened in that case was that one of the Navy SEAL members, not knowing whether they were ready to detonate their vests or not, dove on, tackled the two women, took them down, and then dove on, put his body on top of them, so that if they had any explosives, then the mission would still be carried out. In other words, willing to sacrifice his life so the mission that they were on was not aborted. I mean, this is some incredible stuff here. But the women did not have the vests on. But look at what the Navy SEAL was. The Navy SEAL was prepared to do so that the mission would not be aborted. And it allowed Rob O'Neill to get ahead of some of the other Navy SEALs, and that's why he is the one that's the first one in that room where bin Laden was. And he said that when he went in the room, bin Laden was standing behind one of his wives, had his hands on the shoulders of his wife and was moving his wife forward. And O'Neill said that it took about a second before he fired off 2 rounds. He had not come to arrest bin Laden. And he said that that bin Laden was not in a surrender position and was moving forward, and therefore posed a threat, because who knows what he was wearing around his waist or what threat he posed. And there was nobody saying, put your hands up. They went there to execute justice. And he said he fired off 2 rounds, and bin Laden fell backwards. And then a final round, while he was down, obliterating his face, and that was the mission. The rest of it was then to collect the data that was available, computers and documents and things of that sort. And it just, within 15 minutes, the mission was over, and they're now having to get back on the aircraft, and they got a 90-minute ride out of Pakistan back to Afghanistan, and they don't know whether the missiles are going to be fired at them or not as they exit out of the country. They're still in danger. 90 minutes later, about 85 minutes, because the craft was going at a faster speed than it was in coming in, and 85 minutes later, as they crossed over the border, the announcer came over the air, and it said that you'll be glad to hear for the first time that you're now in Afghanistan. And being the professionals that they were, there was no cheering. What they did was give each other the high five. You know, as I listened to Rob O'Neill, I had to think about what in Washington can you contrast with the dignity of this man who represented the whole team in that mission. I mean, this was a man that had tremendous dignity. I saw him in going before some of the ones who lost loved ones on 911. I saw one man that was in tears and saying that you killed the devil, and I want to thank you for it. And he said, I salute you, sir. And I just watched Rob McNeil that got into a kind of like how they stand more resolute, stand upward, and just the way that he saluted the person that was saluting him, because he had lost a loved one on 911, and the salute that he gave back to him was a moment in history. Very, very moving. And Rob McNeil is an all-American hero, as are all of the members of that team, Navy SEAL 6. And when they showed me the training they went through, and to be a Navy SEAL, which is coveted by all of the ones that's in the military that aspires to be part of a team that carries missions like that, it was something to just go and have a look at the training they went through. These people are, these men are so well trained. As I was saying, I was looking to as I was just thinking, who could you contrast the integrity that you saw emanating out of every pore of Rob McNeil's body? Who in Washington could you compare the dignity, the integrity that you saw from this man? And I have to tell you, I have to be perfectly honest here, I could not think of anybody. That's just the way it is. There are no political officials in Washington. And I think this tells us, if I'm correct in my analysis here, I think I am correct in my analysis. I don't think I'm overstating anything, or understating anything. I don't think anybody in Washington has a character that would show they deserve to shine this man's shoes, nor even to do so with any of the Navy SEAL members that was on that mission. These people, it's incredible what they accomplished.
But you know, the reason why the American political scene, because basically you become a celebrity if you go into politics. Even you become a celebrity, and basically people want from their celebrities good-looking, straight teeth, you know, perfect hair, nice suits, and that's what you're attracting with the political types. That's what you're doing. You're getting people who are presentable, not because they're physically presentable, but they're not morally, spiritually, emotionally. I mean, let's face it. Most of them have very bad backgrounds. I mean, they gave a list one time, talked about Congress, just like several years ago. But there's guys that, would you vote for these bunch of people, like, then they had all these, like, convictions, personal bankruptcies, drug addiction, and stuff like this.
Yeah.
And that was in Congress at that time, who was comprised of people who had all this going on in their personal lives. Now, I don't expect perfection, but I expect people who have a more marked degree of success as a human being than we actually get. I mean, Barack Obama, and the thing is, he wasn't even vetted properly.
No, he wasn't.
He wasn't even vetted. I mean, years ago, they would have gone through fine-toothed his background. Because he got back because he was the first black person to get to that distance on the political scale. He came basically out of nowhere, and that's the whole political thing now. Though basically we elect them like they put up movie stars. They got nice shiny white teeth and nice hair. They can do stuff with. That's all the politicians have to have.
Yeah, in Obama's case, America's character, which is its strength, is also many times its weakness. And in Obama's case, what you have is that the country wanted to believe in what he was saying, although to believe it would be a level of incredulity that is beyond, in many ways, human comprehension. To believe the narrative that he was putting out there, he was in Jeremiah Wright's church, for example, for 20 years and never heard anything the man was saying, when the man was cursing the country out every Sunday and only had one sermon.
Yes, when I was 9 years old, I was going to a Baptist church here in Flint, and the pastor was making derogatory comments about Catholics. My mom's family was all Catholic. I was 9 years old. I told her I stopped going to the church. She said, "Why don't you want to go to the church?" I told her the reason why. Well, they sent the visiting pastor out to see why I stopped going to the church. And I said, I said, I don't agree with Catholic theology. I was 9 years old. Okay, keeping that in mind. I said, but okay, I'm looking at when he said he didn't know what was going on in Jeremiah Wright's church. I went, were you sleeping more than I did at other churches or something?
Well, I had earmuffs on.
I mean, yeah, you basically just give a token nod. I mean, you're in agreement with what he's saying. That's what you are. If you're going there for that length of time, you're in agreement with what
the man was the God father, quote unquote, of his children, for crying out loud. You don't know what this man is saying, and you put him in that position over your children, and put that kind of trust in him, and he's saying things up there that you're not aware of, or if you're aware of, you disagree with. There's no way that could be true.
I heard something I saw something on a meme, and I don't know how far it is. I wish I could check it out, and I should probably, but I mean, to get in the bottom of it, I actually heard that his two children, Obama's two children, aren't really their children. They're adopted, or they're basically somebody else's kid on loan.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what I heard. Now, I didn't mean, if I can't prove that, it seems so far-fetched. It seems so bizarre. It seems it's got to be made up. But you never know in this political scenery now.
There's a lot of baggage that we could talk about that we need further we want to be responsible, so there's the need for further verification and validity of the information. But there's a lot of information out there that raises some very serious questions about who we have. But we have enough information about it by what we see and what we can deduce from our own observations, whether we get the information that will corroborate some of the other stories out there or not. And Houston, we got a problem, and we got a problem in Washington. And that's true of on a number of our fronts, political fronts. I just think we have to think about the character question when we see things like what aired on the network, and we see these stories that play out. We have to ask ourselves about the character questions that are raised. And I saw the character question in this reporting of the Navy SEALs mission that was carried out in which they took out bin Laden. And I couldn't help but think, okay, this man has character. I mean, this is tremendous integrity that I'm looking at here. And I had to think about, where would I see that in Congress, for example? Where would I see it on the Supreme Court? And I stopped asking where would I see it in the White House, because I got 6 years of having observed this president.
What it is, see, though,
and there's a character flaw.
So you're two different types of classes of people, though. You're the person who, like the SEAL member, usually comes from blue collar. Blue collar people are taught to be very loyal to one another, to their country, to believe in fighting and sacrificing. Where you have it basically boils down to the Prince thing, you know. Basically, the person and the average has got different things, a different morality put upon him, whereas the ruler, basically, he doesn't have to do anything except to have the appearance of doing something. See, so you're looking at the dichotomy between these two classes. I mean, the classes. And see, in Obama, everybody wanted, when he first ran, I heard people say, well, he's black. Well, I said, he's so unlike the average black person, say, in the city of Flint. I mean, let's face it, he would panic. He would turn like into a white-knuckled individual, gripping himself there, if he actually had met up with some of the people here in this kind of city. He wouldn't even know how to deal with the average person.
No.
On the average, he wouldn't know how to deal with it.
I have to tell you something. I travel in Africa. I've been in 17 countries in Africa. And I can tell you this, without any fear of being contradicted, is that I've not been able to find a person similar to Obama, not only here in this country. I have not been able to find a person in Africa who is anything like this man. This man is unlike any person that I've encountered on the planet. And if you look at his background is more unusual than, you go look at his background and see whose background even remotely resembles the background this man went through. And the idea that he's a black American, that's another misconception of his background, because this man is not a black American, he's a white American. Or a mixed American, at least.
He's actually, the only parallel I can see between him is the communist leaders of other countries, like maybe a Trotskyite or a Lenin or a Stalin or a Mao Zedong or something like that. Somebody who's always thinks he's speaking for the people when he's never been part of it.
Yeah, but that's his mindset. His background is not that. Yeah, his mindset is similar to that, but his background is one that's very unusual in terms of his father being Kenyan. Never was American citizen. His mom is American citizen, where he gets his American citizenship from.
She also renounced U.S. citizenship at one point.
And she did that also, and that's another part of the issue we're talking about. But anything that has to do with his American citizenship, though, has to be as a result of his mom. Has nothing to do with his dad. Then he's in Indonesia, where he's living with his stepfather, who is Indonesian, and that's another part of his upbringing. And he's in this in the madrasas over there, which is a school in Indonesia he goes to and is there up until the age of 10. Then he's over in Hawaii with grandparents. I mean, where is there any way to have this man grounded in what identity he claims is his identity? Let's say that he accepts the black part of his identity. Where would that come from, given that background? I mean, the man's out there. To me, he's out there floundering around trying to find a grounding point, and I don't think he's found it yet. I think that there are a lot of problems here. But going back to a larger issue about the politicians in general, the fact of the matter is that the reason why we're getting what we're getting in Washington, we can't find anything that compares to the character of Rob O'Neill, is because government attracts people like the people we're seeing in Washington. Government is a magnet for, government is a center where you have power, and it attracts these kind of people. And I think, again, as I think about this more and more, I think this is again why Lord Acton was wrong in the 19th century in terms of where you put the pivotal point about why you're getting the kind of conduct you get from those that are in power. I think Lord Acton was wrong in terms of his assessment. He said that power tends to corrupt. I don't know how power can do that. Power is an abstract. And the idea that it can, on its own, have a tendency, it would have to have that tendency then, even if it is unused. It would have to have some kind of personality that lends itself to having a tendency. How could that be the case? I think that that's a cognitive cognitive dissonance to have made that claim, where he says power tends to corrupt, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. In fact, the statement is contradictory, because it should have been a tendency, and if you put tendency in, it tends to corrupt, then you have to have in the second part of the statement that it tends to corrupt absolutely. He even gets confused in the sentence that he was constructing. Says that power tends to corrupt, and then he says it corrupts absolutely. That's a contradiction right there. But I don't think power is the corrupting influence here. I think people that are pursuing power are inclined toward being corrupt. And this idea that they are going into office to do public service, I don't see any evidence of that. I don't see any evidence of it now, and I don't see any evidence of it in history.
When I was a kid, I always examined. I saw when the president would come down the stairwell of the the Air Force One. They had the red carpet, the podium right there, and they play "Hail to the Chief," and all these people, military guards, these people were willing to give themselves up for this guy's life. Mm-hmm. And to me, it's like almost like a form of idolatry. We create these people, we allow ourselves to be led by them, and yet there's no demonstrable difference between them and us on most issues. Matter of fact, yes, they've actually shown with track records of divorce, substance abuse, being very bad to people around them, being able to willingly throw each other underneath the bus at a drop of a hat. Mm-hmm. They are actually not the personification. They're not the example of what I would personally say I would want to even be a bus driver for a kid, okay, much less a leader of the free world. Yeah. And that's what the thing is. I mean, and I always thought it was bizarre. We have this tendency to, and if you look at order in the society, actually, I mean, somebody comes to the forefront. They speak also eloquently for that one thing. Mm-hmm. Everybody starts gravitating towards letting them make the decisions. Mm-hmm. Well, these people are to go unchallenged. I mean, what has Barack Obama done in his personal life that makes me want to follow him on a larger scale?
Not one thing.
Yeah, I mean, nothing. None of these politicians. I'm not just picking on him, but none of them do.
None of them. John, they always ask this question. I say always ask the question, but on TV you see it every once in a while where they'll ask, in terms of looking at the responsibility of parents, they'll say, do you know where your children are? Well, let me ask you a question. How many people in government on any level, but particularly in Washington, would you want to babysit your children? John, can you see any of the politicians up there if babysitting any of your relatives?
No, I wouldn't even want them to even have access to a small bank account of mine. You know, I wouldn't want them to have the PIN number.
I mean, that's what's up. That's what we have up there. I mean, if you would not trust, if you can't say that you would trust any of the politicians in the Congress, name all the leaders up there. I mean, Mitch McConnell, John Boehner, this airhead in California. I mean, I can't believe what comes out of Nancy Pelosi's mouth. I just stopped listening to her. And Charles Rangel, that's another one. I mean, he's on both sides of the gender divide. It's not just, I mean, Rangel has been out there, and the comments he's making, that's just about as, he's just about as politically ignorant as any of them are. The comments he's making has just been outrageous.
Well, I'm sure that politicians will say stuff to back one little part of their core constituency, but then they're throwing the other underneath the bus. They'll say, like Rangel, I'm sure he's got white people in his district, mm-hmm. and he can't be able to say that he represents their interests at all. Yeah, I mean, that's another thing. I had a friend actually says that maybe now, because it's a bigger country, we should have more senators and more congressmen. And he laid it out. It was like an hour-long thing that he had to lay out. But his justification, I think, has got to be more on target than what we're doing now with the limited and shifting it because of the population. Let's face it, we shouldn't lose membership just because we lost, representation because we lost, population. Mm-hmm. We should retain a certain amount of it. but they should increase in certain areas where they've actually had to reflect more of the pool of the people, if that's a true democratic thing. Because guess what? I think that would actually work against things being pushed through so readily.
Well, it would work in our behalf if, in fact, by increasing the number of members in the House, you would still have the same number in the Senate, two from each state. But in terms of the members in the people's body, which is the House of Representatives, you would benefit from it in the sense that by having more, it would be more difficult for the money changers, the money interests, to buy them and subvert the political process, because by increasing the numbers to accommodate the larger population we have in the United States at this point, it would be more difficult to bribe them, which is not so difficult when you only have 435 members in the House.
No, yeah, you divvy it up now. Let's face it, they might be willing to be open for corruption, the new members of Congress, but they're saying, I'm not going to sell it for that cheap. You got to spread that money out around. You got to get more money so you can buy more of us.
It will break the bank. Although I don't accept that the lobbyists are there because of their corruption. What they're there is feeding the corruption that's already in place, and these persons that are making policy demand to be paid for the persons that they can put regulations on and stifle their businesses. They're demanding that they get something out of the deal that benefits them. I mean, look at the mafia and then look at the legal version of it, which is what you have in Washington. This is a legalized form of the mafia.
I had a friend who was a business person who said,
that's how they operate.
This is like 20 years ago. He said this to me. He said, John, what's the difference between the government and the mob? He said, the government says, if you don't do this, 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 and this, and give us a cut, you can't operate here. And let's face it, in the old days when the mob used to be like in New York, Chicago, they said, you don't operate here unless you pay us protection money.
Right.
Well, that's exactly what we're paying to government. We're paying protection money. Leave us alone, and we'll pay you this much money if you just leave us alone.
That's exactly how it works.
That's all it is. So there's nothing noble about these bastards.
John, they were so upset when the one who wrote the book called Extortion, Schweitzer, Peter Schweitzer, who has a number of books out. One is called The Architects of Ruin, and the book called Extortion. When he put the book out, Extortion, and another one of his books, which is also a primary read, and that is the book that is called Throw Them All Out, which is saying that all of them are a problem up there, and they all should be thrown out. I mean, I agree with that, but it's not going to happen. But at least we can do what we just did 2 weeks ago. But when they put the book out called Extortion, you can always tell the ones who are guilty. I learned this when I was a child. My mom would come in and accuse. I had 4 brothers and a sister, and she'd come in and accuse me of having taken some cookies out of the cookie jar. What my mom would do was wait for the first one to say they didn't do it, which was me. Which was always me, and my mom would start wailing because the one that would holler first, my mom knew was the one that was guilty, and plus she knew the fact that I was guilty last time and the time before that. So last night and the night before, 24 Robins came in. I think it goes 24 Robins came in my door, So my mom pretty much knew it was me anyway because of past history. But once I said I didn't do it, my mom would go get the belt.
Yeah, I'd like to know this too. Like Barack Obama and his ilk, they always go on about how the poor, the rich are taking this country over. And you look at their personal incomes and stuff like that. Barack Obama started out with millions, $14, $15 million his personal account. How the hell does that happen? I got to meet his brokers. I want to meet his investment crew. Because if you could take $1 million or $500,000 and parlay it over 6 years, when the economy's in the tank, in the toilet. Yeah, I want to meet these people. So, I mean, they're what we call Professional Fart Smellers. Like you're sitting around a group and somebody goes, what smells so bad? It's the person making a big, drawing attention to it is the one who usually did it. Yeah. That's exactly what they'll talk about getting money out of politics. When they're taking millions of dollars to actually do exactly the bidding of the lobbyists.
Get the money out of politics. That's why they're in politics. Look, look, the average worth of the people in Washington, in government in Washington, those are elected officials, the average net worth is $900 and $60-some thousand, and 50% of them with no skills. Well, if they had any skills to write anything, they'd be running businesses. But they have legitimate power because they'll be over the corporations that they've established, and you know, have the right to rule that because you created it. You didn't create anything out here.
Well, they have good skills. They go to the right hairstylist, and they look good in certain clothing. That's their skill set.
That's what and the covering. I mean, wolves in sheep's clothing. The covering is not the person. But 50% of those people in the Congress are millionaires. Now, there's 1% of the people out here that are millionaires, and 50% of them are millionaires. So either you have to conclude that the people that run for government are 50 times smarter than the people who don't run for government positions and are not elected to office in Congress, or something else is going on. And I have to tell you, I'm leaning towards something else is going on. I don't think that there's any indication that they're smart. They're not our betters. I don't care what Gruber, that's another part of this conversation today, and I don't care what Gruber was talking about. And I think we ought to get off of this media narrative that Gruber is the only one who thinks that way. I mean, has anybody seen anything in Gruber's demeanor that he's some rocket scientist? He sounds to me like a psychopath. That, I mean, I haven't seen anything that shows he knows anything. He wrote 2,000 pages, which he admitted. This is how deranged he is. Admitted, and this is being taped. I mean, this man was not taped behind his back. This man is actually allowing himself to be taped, bragging about how he tortured the language in which the Obamacare bill was written so as to throw the American people off. He's not talking about the stupidity of the American people. He's talking about his own arrogance. Because if the people were so stupid, then why did he have to, in fact, write it in tortured language to which it could not be understood? In fact, he didn't even tell anybody what was in the bill. I mean, Nancy Pelosi was saying you have to read the bill. She had to read the bill. She hadn't read it in order to find out what was in it.
She said you have to pass it before you see what's in it.
Yeah, right. You have to pass before you can read it.
It's like, it's not a grab bag, Nancy. It's like, the United States healthcare system you're messing with. And she was so, I mean, that's so blithely. You got to see it before, you got to pass it before you see it. I mean, that's just so ridiculous. Would you sign a car note before seeing the conditions of it? No.
That is not the stupidity of the American people. That's the arrogance of our betters, those who consider themselves to be better than we are and to be smarter than we are.
But I think people should have more contempt of the politicians. I mean, I have people come in here and say...
I have nothing but contempt for them.
They say, well, there's a problem. You got too much cynicism. I said, everything it says that comes out of a politician's mouth should be cross-examined, okay? I mean, you're taking anything they say with a grain of salt, with any truth to it. You're an idiot. Because these people have it designed so they can screw with you as much as they can. There's nothing good about these people. There's nothing.
John, when they tell the American people the incredulous things like the Democrats were saying right before the election, trying to stir up some black voters because only 12% of the blacks went to the polls that were eligible to vote. I mean, they were turned off because heaven did not reign supreme once Obama was elected to a second term when it stopped being Bush's fault. And so they were disenchanted, and they stayed home. And to try to rear up, because they saw there was no enthusiasm out there by a major part of his base that votes 95% for these characters. They had to try to energize their base, an important part of their base. And so they came out and told them that the Democrats, hate blacks, and told the women that they hate women. And the people were able to get through that narrative after being worn out over in every election. That's what you hear. And they just wore thin because it's impossible to believe that anybody hates women in the political arena after 1920, because that's when they passed the 19th Amendment. And if anybody thinks they're hating on anybody, they can vote. I tell you who you're hating on. You're hating on children that being carried in their mother's wombs, and that's because of the absence of a vote. They hate on them until and then when they're born, they hate on them until 18 years of age. After that, there's no hate, because a politician has never seen a voter that he or she didn't like. And so you can get off that narrative, and the people were not moved by that narrative, being told that nonsense by these politicians who will tell you anything. You'd be better off doing what John just said, and that is to interrogate anything they say and take everything they say with a pound, it's a grain of salt. No, it's not a grain of salt when they're talking. It's a pound of salt, maybe a ton of it. Because when a politician is talking, he's talking in front of his own self-interest. And the buck, all the bucks, including the ones they take under the table, all the bucks stop at that particular parameter. Beyond that boundary line, there is nothing else to be said about it. What they say it in their own self-interest.
Well, look at Harry S. Truman, for example, President Harry S. Truman.
Yeah.
He had failed at all other ventures until he got into politics. So basically, that tells a lot. I mean, all the other ventures, and some people say that shows that anybody can become a political leader. I say that's kind of scary. I think that we should demand, they say we should expect too much from our leaders. We don't expect enough. I mean, years ago, my I got a friend who actually advocates that anybody who becomes president should have to have military experience. Well, before Obama, I was like, no, that's stupid, because eventually if we have the desired end, we're going to get away from warfare. But with Obama in power, he just so arrogantly has such a sneering attitude towards the military and the use of military power. I think it should be a requirement for anybody to become the commander should have military experience. Mm-hmm. I really think that.
Yeah, and John, we have to also look at the history, which shows that we have not really had at any moment in time those persons that stand out in the political arena. Most of the great people that we've had do not go into politics. In fact, almost all the ones who are great among us don't go into politics. And if you doubt that, I would have you to go back at the time when America was experiencing its greatest moment, and that's at the foundation of the country. I want you to notice something here that nobody has pointed out before, and I'm going to point out here for the first time in the public arena. I haven't said this before myself, but I will say it now. Go back and look at the presidents of the United States, the first ones, up to John Quincy Adams. George Washington, John Adams, Thomas Jefferson, James Madison, James Monroe, and John Quincy Adams, the son of the second president. And ask yourself what is going on here. What you see going on is that they are placing the ones who were involved in the writing of the documents of the country at the foundation of creating the Constitution that would govern the country. They're going back and revisiting those persons and put them in power. Why is that? Because the numbers are never great. The numbers of persons that's out there to be chosen, to be placed in government, those numbers are not great. And I'll tell you another thing you have to look at, and that is look at Mount Rushmore. Who else? I have some names, by the way. And you don't have to do what Obama said. He before he got in office, before he showed himself, revealed himself, was talking about that he might not be able to fit up there because of his ears and all of that. He don't belong up there in the first place. We ain't carving out no room for you. Ain't taking nobody down from there and putting you up there. For what? The man has not accomplished anything. But look at how many we have up there. I mean, when you have the last president that was put up there was Theodore Roosevelt, and Roosevelt was put up there after whose administration? Let me just give you the years of his administration. He took over the administration from William McKinley and became president in 1901 and ran again in 1904, and then, respecting the precedent set by George Washington, stood down in 1912, giving a chance for, stood down in 1908 and gave a chance for William Taft to become president, and then was dissatisfied with what Taft had done and stood back up in 1912 and ran on the Bull Moose Party in that year and gave an opportunity, unfortunately, for Woodrow Wilson to become president. And that's one of the worst moves that's happened in American history before this landslide, before this kamikaze was put upon the country in 1908. In fact, that was 100 years ago, interestingly enough, when Theodore Roosevelt stood down and Obama was standing up to run for president in 2008. And we've been suffering ever since. But going back to Mount Rushmore, when you look at the 4 presidents up there, and they are, let me name them. George Washington, he belongs up there. George Washington was great. And I don't know how anybody can justify, which these progressives did, putting Abraham Lincoln up there above George Washington. You know, that tells me a lot about these persons who are like Gruber on these college campuses. Gruber's not an exception. Gruber is part of the kind of mindset that operates inside these classrooms where they can operate with dictatorial authority, because if you raise your hand and you object to what they're teaching up there, you're going to pay a price for it. If you doubt that, go back and read David Horowitz's book called Radical Son, where he talks about how when he's on the radical edge, at least the conservatives that were running the college campuses would not take away from your credit if you disagree with them in the papers that you wrote. That's not true now. If you go in Gruber's class, I bet you if you go in there with anything that remotely sounds different than what he's up there talking about, you're going to pay a price for it.
Yeah, it's like, you know, but the thing is, that's endemic to society overall. Like, you got all these people, you have the people who are like the atheists now, who want to attack, like, they have so great certainty that they can't, they think they have such great certainty that they want to shut out any other debate. And it's like, okay, if it's going to be an absurd thing that somebody's going to object to your ideas with, it's going to fall by the wayside. Well, what's the problem that you haven't, what you say, being examined by other people or even criticized? Oh, no, we can't do that. We can't teach this, we can't teach that. Why, it's an absurdity. Well, who are you to decide what's an absurdity? That's just sheer arrogance on your behalf.
Look at Gruber. What gives Gruber I stopped talking about the arrogance and started talking about the real issue, which is the right. What gave him the right, which he is actually admitting that he took the liberty to do this, which means he took the liberty from the American people to do it, the liberty to suborn their own view of health care. He actually is admitting this is what the real issue is. I mean, his arrogance is another issue. I mean, that's a sidebar issue. The real issue is that this man felt that he had the right as our superior to take our liberty from us of deciding for ourselves what health care we're going to have. And although we were objecting to them taking it over, he felt that the right to write the language in such a way is that it tricks the American people, hoodwink the American people to be in a position to accept that, which the American people never accepted, which has nothing to do with the stupidity of the American people. It has everything to do with the arrogance of Gruber, because the people still don't accept Obamacare. We're not talking about the stupidity of the American people, and the press ought to get off that narrative and place it upon the arrogance of these people in government that think they have the right to create a nanny state that tell us how we ought to live every part of our lives. That's what's really happening in this country. I mean, I tell you what you need to do out there in the listenership of allpointstv.com, and we are growing in numbers, and we are not yet where we're going to be, but we're going to continue to until we get there, and then we're not even going to stop at that point. But what I really would like you to focus on is this mindset where they think that even though we may feel one way, they have the right to tell us that they're going to do something different. I mean, we're not even down with immigration. But look what Obama's doing, telling us that he, not we the people, but he is going to, if the Congress does not act, I won't even talk to this man through this lens and say, Mr. President, as Janine Pirro does on her program. She's brilliant.
But you know what I don't like about this?
Mr. President.
You know, another thing is, too, they got the blacks believing, a lot of blacks believe, and black leadership believe that they got to be on board for this, like, you know, this amnesty thing, because, you know, people of color are being best represented. It's going to be the blacks who are going to be more seriously impacted upon negatively by allowing these illegals to become citizens.
Yes.
Because now it's a cheap source of labor, a cheaper source of labor.
Driving the wages down.
Driving the wages down. And yet, you say that you're a racist. I mean, I'm tired of being called a racist. Because, you know, it doesn't have any effect on me anymore. They're just wasting their air doing that.
Well, if they would, if it would stop having an effect, they would stop using it. As long as they can use it as a calling card or a race card, they're going to use it. What people need to do is stop paying attention to that noise that's being made. This country has never been the racist country they're talking about. We're talking about racist politicians.
I like to see this, too. Even in the 60s, you and I talked about this. If the whites were as racist as they were accused of, the civil rights movement would have gone nowhere.
I ain't buying, look, John, I'm not buying that America is a racist country. The politicians have been the racists in this country. And they were racist up until the empowerment of the group that they were targeting were able to vote. In other words, and they were sexist too in the political arena until 1920. You go and look and see how Susan B. Anthony was treated. And observe that. And look at how women are being treated right now. There's no, this idea that they are targeting women is nonsense after 1920. And after 1965, the idea that there is racism, systematic racism against blacks in this country after 1965 is also nonsense. If any racism is going on, it's going on because the pendulum has swung to the other side. You don't call it Jim Crow laws today because whites are more awake than blacks are. So what you call it in their case, in discrimination being practiced against them, is you call it affirmative action. Because if it was placed under the banner of Jim Crow laws, whites who are more politically sophisticated, that's a fact, than blacks are. Blacks, look, many things go by blacks that don't go by others, and they've got to understand that. You got to understand it in Ferguson, and you got to understand it in terms of what these politicians are doing in the Congressional Negro Caucus, and that's what they are. Really what some have called them the Congressional, the Caucasian Caucus. These people are not representing any black people, neither is Al Sharpton or Jesse Jackson. The truth has to be told here, and I'm the one to tell it. I wrote about this. I wrote about some of this, not all of it. I had to write about, I'm doing a 5-part series. I did part 4 today on Facebook. And I'm working on the part 5 for tomorrow. I got to now close it out. But I've written 4 parts of it to explain, to try to put another temperament out there in terms of what's really going on here. As people behind the scenes are playing these people out there in the street like a violin. And it's all, nothing but a charade by this community organizer in the White House whose resume basically is that of a student in college who went to the university, if he in fact was there. I'm gonna give him I'm gonna cut him some slack here and say he was there. Although there are people raising questions about it. I think I won't raise that question. What I will raise the question based upon what I'm looking at is that he didn't go to class very often, or there's no evidence that he was in there paying. If he did go to class, there's no evidence in there he was paying attention, because I don't see any. I don't know what people are talking about in terms of, he's a law professor. I don't see any evidence of that. The man doesn't understand the Constitution. It doesn't follow any of it. I don't see any evidence of the things they're talking about in terms of this man is supposed to be so bright. In fact, I don't see anybody understand what they're talking about on immigration, which is the 14th Amendment. Which one day when I get a chance to go into that, we're gonna have a talk about the 14th Amendment and how it's been subverted and things like that. But anyway, we've got to give honor to what was on that airing last week with the Navy SEAL. I would ask you to try to compare what you saw with anybody in Washington. Then you can begin to see what the problem is that we have here. Okay, we got to get out of here because we can't stay here all day. Plus, you wouldn't stay here all day with us anyway, so we got to respect the fact that you have other things to do as well. We're going to cut out of here until next week, and we're going to see you next week at the same time at 2 o'clock. Don't forget, next week also, Black History Corner comes on as well from 3:30 to 4. Until that time, I want you to follow your dream, because if you don't follow your dream, you'll never know what's on the other side of the rainbow.